Neophylim,
The Nephilim.
Nephilim to go into the fallen state. Was
Yes.
their life, like their lifestyle being too technologically oriented? Was that the cause, or was there an event, a cause of
There's
event?
genetics and seeds.
There is a story told by a dragon queen. Her name is Corinna Muller from Milan, and had memory. And she claims to recall a particular battle in the Dracu culture where, they were fiercely survivalistic and warrior-like. And in that particular battle, they suffered what was akin to a nuclear blast that mutated their gene pool. And at that point, instead of having one heart, they had two hearts. We know in Phil Schneider and others' personal reports of the Draco at Dulce that they had two hearts and were highly telepathic, hard to kill. And the split heart was, in some ways, an end to the possibility of real compassion. And this is repeated in some of the myths. So that's a piece of the story. Another piece of the story is the loss of bliss making in the blood for the Vestal Virgin culture, and addiction to gold powder, and the use of too much metal in their environment. And all of those things cause DNA to lose charge.
2 stars, 2 hearts.
2 stars, 2 hearts, twinning. So we had 2 comments here. One is that about the money aspect. Classically, this culture then becomes a culture that regards harvesting DNA like banking. And so the origin of banking insurance, which is credited to the Templars, actually came from the Dracu, who were harvesting hundreds of planetoids in a similar way. And this, your story about creating a gene pool that then rebels, this culture creates at least 3 different gene pool experiments on Earth, and like the Lemurian, they basically get out of control and get away and escape from the Matrix. And
Does that mean you don't go through the sun? Just take the longer route and go somewhere else?
Well, the humanoids who escape, the Lemurian story is the humanoids won, Lim Uru. The humanoids won against the Uru by a nuclear blast which destroyed the atmosphere. And so the remnant humanoids had to go underground, and their blood is said to have changed from green to red, chlorophyll to heme, because they no longer had the access to the oxygen, and they had to use iron to fix oxygen in blood. And that's where we got the Adamic race, which is the next one, which means red man or iron man. So the first attempt, the Lemurian, is actually a genetic experiment that got away from the Dracu culture, escaped the Matrix. And this series of rebellions is described in several books, actually. So yes, creating a gene pool that then gets away. And so there are many reasons politically why Enki is legally required not to give too much psychokinesis to his genetic experiments. And when he used his own sperm here, and that's the next part of the story, that was highly illegal. So here's what happened. Just brief, most of you know this part of the story, but the gold mining operations were a pain in the ass. These Anunnaki couldn't handle it, and so they needed to make some gold mining slaves. There was a rebellion in South Africa. Remember that Enki is assigned to South Africa, which later became the word Kilimanjaro, meaning Enki. And Enlil is assigned to North Africa. So you have the white race here. And here Enki, remember, Enki's blood is blue-black from black here. So you have the black pharaoh, the Nubian, the Coptic, and the story that the black pharaoh that became Akhenaten, who was black. And so later when Akhenaten changed his name to Moses, in the statue at Rennes-le-Château, you see that the devil Lucifer, who's really Enki, is black. He has horns, Moses, Akhenaten, horns. And he is, in the statue, holding up Magdalene. And so clearly Magdalene's blood comes from Lucifer. And this drove Saunier insane at Rennes-le-Château. He couldn't handle when he discovered the history. But the history is true. The guy that he was calling the devil is basically the father of his hero, Magdalene. Oops! We got our PR a little screwed up here, didn't we? And so this is the black and white story of the whole Rennes le Chateau, and there's whole new books about what drove Saunier nuts. Anyway, so Enki, blue black bud, chem, became the name for Egypt from access to the place of blackness and chemistry and alchemy, has this assignment. He says, look, I could take some of the local Cro-Magnon and make some gold mining slaves by upgrading their DNA slightly. And he sends a message back to Sirius A on 2 and says, hey Dad, we could get this gold mining back on track if we made some gold mining slaves over here. And Enlil, Michael, correctly, Yahweh, says, no Dad, that's illegal in our culture. It would interfere with the guild right of star navigating. He was right. Thou shalt not interfere with indigenous gene pools. The prime directive. And by the way, when the Andromedans categorize all the 22 different ETs who mess with our DNA, the two categories are interventionist and non-interventionist, right? So Procyon, Tau Ceti, Sirius A, Andromeda, Arcturus, these are non-interventionist cultures. Whereas the interventionists, you have Alpha Draconis, Sirius B. So this was a non-interventionist rule. And Anu cables back, he says, well, I know it's against the rules, but look, we're going to die without this here gold powder, so he gives Enki the go-ahead. Now, the neat thing about that is that Enki picked the why did Enki pick the Cro-Magnon he did?
They exercise compassion.
Thank you. Go to the head of the class. Enki noticed that one of the local apes was seen actually exhibiting compassion to the other animals. This was shockingly interesting. The real physics here, it means that phase conjugation was still operative in some of the high monkeys there. So this was a highly vibrant DNA that actually had compassion. And so this created a DNA that was actually dominant over Enki's own reptilian DNA, was recessive, was less strong. Their DNA was weakening. Anyway, so Enki basically rapes an egg. For the first bunch, he used Cro-Magnon DNA and Cro-Magnon eggs, but these were not fertile. And then he decides he needs a fertile, the first Eve, and so he takes a Cro-Magnon egg, and it's a kind of rape. And this is how we need to understand. Yes, go ahead.
The Cro-Magnon, they were from Earth.
Yes.
They had been born.
Indigenous from rather ancient Earth. And perhaps their ancient roots of these Cro-Magnon were related to the bloodlines on Lyra. That's part of the story, that the ancient home of a lot of DNA came from Earth millennia, millions of years earlier.
That's a chicken or egg question.
That it is. It's kind of a Groundhog Day story here. So the Cro-Magnon egg, you know, the story is that you're doing shamanic recapitulation, rebirthing for the whole gene pool. Now you need to get back to the moment of conception. Hello. Because that's how you do rebirthing, right? So here's the rebirth. Look, a little rape going on here, a little pain in the past. So the Cro-Magnon egg is raped, really, and put in his half-sister, Ninhursag, Inanna, depends who you believe. Hag, Mag, Magog, Sag, Hag. Og, you see the word Mag here. Og means fire going within. And Mag means matrix or mother of fire. Yeah? So fire in the blood comes from the Mag. It's really true. Ignited blood. So the theme, remember, ignition of blood, title of the story. So half-sister Ninhursag Inanna, it gets to be the wet nurse for an egg from a Cro-Magnon. And of course, Enki is promiscuous. This fella is just leaking sperm all over the place. I'm sorry. This guy is a colorful character. Reminds me of, yes, we won't go into it. Yeah. Pardon? Amenhotep. These guys leaked sperm a lot. Which is, I mean, you know,
It's like,
for better or for worse.
you're in the colonies.
Yeah, right. So he uses his own sperm in his half-sister Ninhursag Inanna and produces the first fertile female Eve. Now, we need to know what the word Adam and Eve actually mean.
Whose sperm? Enki's sperm?
Enki's own sperm. He used his own sperm. Absolutely.
Inseminate.
inseminated his half-sister, in whom he had put an egg from a Cro-Magnon.
Okay.
As a genetic engineer, I mean, at Dolly the sheep's laboratory, Enki would be regarded as a klutz. Okay? Just about as klutzy as those people there, so it all sort of fits. So Adam and Eve, Adam meant donkey or Borg or slave, literally made by the Anunnaki, Man, made by Anunnaki. Adamic means red race, and the original word for them was Tak Adama, which means the red race created as from the Tak. Tak means Orion. Al-Natak, Mintaka, Hurtak, Ur-Tak. Ur means dragon from Tak means Orion. H, breathe from Hurtak. Breathe from the dragons of Orion.
So I got where the first Eve came from, but where did the first Adam come from?
So the story of the split rib is actually a genetic operation. It's a cloning function.
Oh, so
I
Adam
think.
and Eve are clones.
I suspect that there's controversy on that one, but I don't think the
It
division
can't
was...
be a clone if one's male and one's female.
It was definitely inbreeding. And Eve's rib, many people interpret to be a genetic engineering story where the rib is actually a haploid DNA. But I don't have a real answer to that question. But clearly, even the Adam and Eve story together is really racial. It's not a story of individuals so much. Just like the story of later in this story, we're coming to it very quickly anyway, the story of Ab, Ra, Am. Ra means sun god, which originally was Enki, and then later Enlil tried to take it over. But Abraham is a name for Enki. And Abraham begat with Sarah, which is Asa of Ra. Sarah, the Asa, dragon queen of Ra. And begats the whole Benjaminic lineage. So, and they came from the city Ur. You see? So this story, which biblically has been interpreted as the names of people, is actually the names of races. And many historians have now concluded that, and I think that's somewhat relevant here as well. This is a description of racial roots rather than individual persons so much, and needs to be interpreted as such.
So in other words, in a way, they were growing in semi-vats races.
That this was a explicit attempt. It's like different versions of Bill Gates software, yes. That this is Enki trying to discover how to make the software work.
And so it keeps on rebooting itself all the time.
Exactly, and requires inbreeding to keep the shape-shifting capability. So now, the next part of this story would be basically all the different examples we have of what the bloodline Enki means. Now, here's the different names. Enki went by the word Ea, by the word Atun, by the word Enki, by the word Adonai, and later we have the words Poseidon and the Zeus story, whereas and it actually became called Lucifer. And later it became the word Baal, as in Beelzebub, and Baalbek. And then it became the word Bo, as in Boheme and Bulgaria. So this side of the family had lots of names, many cultures. And this side of the family, Enlil, in Egypt, was called Amun. The Amun-Ra is in our word Amen. And these are the ones who murdered Akhenaten. And then Yahweh, and Michael. You have the Michaelic versus the Luciferic, and also the word Ahrimanic in the Steiner terminology, Ahriman. The Ahrimans like computers, the Lucifers don't.